Hello, and welcome once again to Family Historian. My name is Stephen Conti. Tonight I have another one of my genealogy occupation shows. In the past I have done many shows like this, and I'll name some. I did one on finding your farmer ancestor, finding your merchant ancestor, finding your miner ancestor, finding your gold prospector ancestor, your lumberjack ancestor, and even your pirate ancestor. Yes, I did that one also. But tonight we're going to talk about finding your ironworker ancestor from the 17 and 1800s right here in New Jersey. So if any of you out there have an ironworker lurking in your genealogy, please take note. And now I'm going to welcome my guest, a very fine man. He is the leading man of history and genealogy, Tom Riley. This is his umpteenth visit on my show. He is a teacher, a local historian, an author of 8 or 9 books, I believe, and a genealogist. And more recently, he has become the founder of a museum. Now, who can say that? And tonight, Tom is going to teach us about finding your ironworker ancestor. And now let's welcome my buddy and yours, Tom Riley. Tom, good to see you again.
Happy to be here.
It's been 16 months since I saw you on this show.
Yep.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, before we go into the how-to of finding the ironworker, Tom, let's go way back. When was the ironworker industry, these men who built America, founded in New Jersey? Give us a year.
Well, we're talking about 1740 at least, probably even before that.
Yeah.
And it starts with the Ogden family. The Ogden family came to northern New Jersey looking for precious metals, like everybody else, right?
Right.
They're looking for gold and silver, and they would have liked to find copper, but the Native Americans couldn't find any of that.
Yeah.
But they did show them some black rock.
Oh, yes, we have it right here.
Like this one. And this was the most unusual type of rock that they could show them. And of course, because the iron industry was well established in Europe at that time, the Ogdens right away recognized this as iron.
Right. And there is an Ogdensburg in Sussex
Same
County.
family.
Right. Okay.
Same family. All of the Ogdens. There were a number of Ogdens that were significant in New Jersey history, and that was one of them.
Right. And what is this item here?
Okay, we're going to talk about after they mine.
Yeah.
You know, they got to get it out of the ground. That's the first step.
Right.
So once they get it out of the ground, they take it to a furnace, which we're going to talk about.
Yes.
And they heat this up to about 3,000 degrees. So at 3,000 degrees, the iron will melt out of this. Now, this particular piece is 60% iron. So that means there's a lot of other stuff in there too.
Right.
A lot of other minerals, a lot of other chemicals, but they wanted the liquid iron. So after they heat it up to 3,000 degrees, the liquid starts to fall to the bottom of the furnace, and this is what's left. This is the slag. So this is after the iron has been melted out of the rock, this is what's left.
Right, right. Now these mines are in northern New Jersey, where you live, and that would be in the Highlands, like Passaic County, Sussex County.
Yep, certainly Morris County.
Right,
for sure, yes.
So the furnace was the first place where these men would work, in the furnace.
Well, probably the first would be the miners, right?
The miners,
The miners have to get it out of the ground. And, and that was probably the most dangerous job in this whole industry.
Right, right.
Because, of course, they were dealing with explosives. They worked in 3-man groups. One guy would hold the drill.
Right.
And the other 2 guys would hit it with a sledgehammer like this one.
Right, right.
So if they missed or dealing with explosives, you know, there were a lot of accidents in the mining.
Okay,
so after mining, then it goes to the furnace.
Furnace, okay. And then you have the next step, the original forge.
Yes.
And can you explain? We have photos of many of these things. The original forge.
Okay. So from the furnace, the liquid metal would drop out,
Yeah.
and they would come up with a bar. You know, they called it a pig iron.
Yes.
So the pig iron was a big bar. That was the product of the furnace.
Right.
From the furnace, it would go to a forge. Now, in the forge, usually with hammers, like originally before mechanization, you know, they would be hitting it with sledgehammer because when you pound on it, it knocks the impurities out of it.
Right.
Later on, they're going to have water wheels. Of course, the water wheel is important for the forge as well.
Okay.
And the furnace. And the water wheel would turn a hammer, and a big heavy hammer would hit it.
And this is all part of the original forge, or you put down finishing forge?
Yes, this is the original forge.
Okay.
And the product of the original forge would be usually bar iron, long, thick bars of
Yes,
iron.
yes.
Then from there, they would take it to another forge, which was the finishing forge.
Right.
Sometimes they would call them a finery. And they would take those bars and then make them into products like nails. Here's an example right here.
Right, and you put down horseshoes.
Horseshoes, cast iron, anything made out of cast iron, you could make it into, you know, from the iron from the finishing forge.
Right. Now let's talk about the iron workers, because there were many tasks that these men did. These were the men who built America, by the way. Am I correct in that?
That's for sure. Well, the iron industry is one of the first industries.
Right. And you gave me a list of their jobs. You just don't say iron miner. Iron worker, rather. But miner is correct. So you have the miners.
Right.
And then you have is that the forge workers?
Well, first there would be a whole slew of people working at the furnace.
Okay.
Now, these were charcoal furnaces. You know, we don't have coal around here.
Right, right.
So the fuel was charcoal. And what we did have was trees. Now, charcoal burns twice as hot as wood does.
Yes.
So they would convert the trees, the wood, cut them into 4-foot sections and stack them up, cover them up with dirt and sand and whatever they can to make it smolder to create the charcoal. And that was a big number of people in this industry. Colliers. Colliers were the guys making the charcoals.
So you had miners, furnace workers, forge men?
Yes.
Is that the right term?
Yes.
Okay. Woodcutters.
Okay, and like there's a difference between the colliers who were making the charcoal, and that required 24 hours. They had to be out there in the woods 24 hours to watch it to keep it smoldering.
Right, right.
But in addition to that, you have another whole group of men who are actually chopping the trees down.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they would be the woodcutters.
Yeah. Now, back in the old days, we're talking 1800s.
Correct.
Okay. Did these men have unions? Were unions
No.
formed in those days?
Absolutely
You
not.
just got paid for the hours that you worked? Or?
For sure. And a lot of it was part-time work. For instance, the colliers making the charcoal and the woodcutters, they were usually farmers because you made the charcoal in the fall because they wanted the trees. They wanted the sap from the trees to run down into, they don't want to cut it in the summertime.
Right.
So they waited until the fall. Then the woodcutters would come in, chop the trees down, and then they would make the big piles. Some of them would be 25 feet square or 8 feet high.
Right.
To make the charcoal.
Yeah. Now, when I did my lumberjack show, I mentioned the lumberjack show, a very fun show, by the way. Those men were part-timers also. Farmers, they had to make money.
There you go.
And I also forgot to mention, I did a show on gold prospectors. I don't know if I mentioned that one, but that was also a part-time occupation. Now, you have a personal connection to iron workers in the person of your great-great-grandpa, a very elusive man. Tell our viewers what his name is and where he was born and when he was born.
Well, James Riley is my great-great-grandfather. And family history says, and this is one of the finding out who he is search, but family history tradition says he was born in Monmouth County, New Jersey. But I've tried for 40 years. Other members have tried for 40 years. I even paid a professional genealogist from Ancestry.com.
Yes, yes.
And they couldn't find where he was born. They couldn't find anything. The earliest we know about him is he was in Ringwood, working in the forge at Ringwood. He made an iron crowbar there.
Yes.
In 1830.
And what year was he born?
He was born in 1809.
And we do have a photo of his home and his grave.
Yep.
And his home is still standing.
Still standing. It was part of Pequannock Township. Now it's Riverdale. But it is still standing, yeah. And we're not sure when that was built either. But he moved there from Ringwood. He moved to Pequannock Township
Right.
in 1845.
And yet you cannot go beyond him with his parentage or...
In genealogy, we call that a brick wall.
Yes, yes.
That's my brick wall.
Well, maybe your iron wall, rather.
Yeah.
Maybe you should conduct a seance or something and conjure him back. Right. Now, let's get to the how-to, the genealogy how-to. And you made a very nice list for me here. The first one you have is oral history. Can you explain the importance of that to our viewers?
That's always the first place to check. And even though, like with my case, a lot of times it can't be documented, it gives you a starting point. Talk to your oldest family members. Check family Bibles.
Right.
Check family sources first. Pick up those stories. That'll give you a starting point, and a lot of times you'll be able to verify where they are.
Right. And then, of course, we have the census records, which are marvelous. They are the byline of any kind of genealogy. Explain, we have some visuals of these. I think we have an 1850?
60.
60.
Yep.
From where? From where?
From Pumpton Township.
Okay, which is right in that area.
Right, it's Pumpton Lakes, that area, Bloomingdale, Pumpton
And
Lakes.
this does list the occupation.
Yes.
All right. Can you explain the record, what it looks like? Yeah.
Started in 1850. 1840 does not list anything except the head of the household.
Right.
So it's not real valuable. 1850 does list occupations.
Yes.
So does 1860, 1870, 1880. They all do a really good job of showing you exactly what the occupations are.
Right.
And a lot of times you can tell because it's done by residents. You know, the census taker is going down the road, going from house to house.
Right.
So you can kind of tell. For instance, in our example for 1860,
In Pumpton
Township,
all
of those residences are all ironworkers. Even to the point where, they were going from house to house and, well, this guy's a wagon maker. This guy's a wheelwright. This guy's a teamster. Now, there were a lot of jobs driving those wagons. Everything is by wagon, teamsters. A lot of wagons were used. So the fact that they're all listed together as living next to each other, they were probably working for the Trenton Iron Company.
And that's how you discovered that your great-great-grandpa was an iron worker, because you did not know that. Explain, you looked at neighbors and on the census. Yeah.
Another way of finding, and on our list there is the census.
Yes.
So, I checked that first, and he was listed along with a lot of other neighbors who I knew were iron workers.
Right.
So that was the first hint. So when I went to the National Archives, I was checking for military records, and I found that his daughter was born at Ringwood. Her husband was a Civil War veteran, and they had to give an affidavit, and it mentioned James Riley at Ringwood, and that gave me another start. Because, Ringwood was the Ringwood Iron Company.
Yes.
Ringwood was under the Hewitts. It was the Trenton Iron Company.
Yes.
Before that, it was the American Iron Company. So if you lived in Ringwood or around Ringwood, 99% sure, unless you were a farmer, you were working for the iron industry.
And that is a very beautiful area.
Ringwood Manor.
It's mountainous. I've gone hiking up there, and it's wonderful, And I don't like these people who put down New Jersey, But if you go up there, it's gorgeous.
Ringwood Manor is a beautiful state park.
And you have so many routes up there.
Yep.
Would that be the Highlands?
Oh yeah, that's part of the Highlands.
Right.
Highlands go from there up to the Kinnatini Ridge, where High Point is.
Right. And I also found a printed census from Pennsylvania, 1850, and you saw that. And they do give all the specific jobs that these men had. I think one is from Brandywine, Pennsylvania, and another one is from West Calm, Pennsylvania.
One of the interesting things on that list was, one of the jobs was roller.
Yes.
And that's really the next step in the iron producing they would have rolling mills.
Yeah.
Because originally they would hit the iron with sledgehammers.
Yeah.
Then they had those hammers, big hammers run by the water wheel.
Yeah.
Well, the next step was a rolling mill. And what they did was they took the hot iron as bars.
Yeah.
And they would have these two big rollers.
Yes.
And of course, the thickness of the iron would be a little bit, and they would run it through these rollers, and that would squeeze out the impurities.
Right. Isn't that something?
So that was another occupation, another type of iron factory.
We have a book on the set tonight about iron workers, iron in the Highlands. This is the book that you edited. It's called Iron in the Highlands. So if you're interested in this profession, occupation of iron workers, this is the book to get your hands on. Will you have any genealogy information in here?
There are a lot of people mentioned, a lot of families, a lot of, yes. And everything we've talked about so far today is in that book. Like even on the cover, you can see the furnace and the forge. And yes, there are a number of families mentioned in there.
And this book is still available in libraries,
it's
perhaps?
At all the libraries and also at Ringwood Manor.
Very good. Okay,
and the Highlands Historical Society.
Very good. Let's get back to our sources. Of course, a famous one is FamilySearch.com, which many people have used. Ancestry.com, very popular. Newspapers.com. Tell us why the newspapers would be good.
Well, Family Search is a free site.
Yeah.
Ancestry is a pay site, but it's very valuable. You know, I feel I get my money out of it.
Yes.
Newspapers.com is a pay site. But again, I think it's very well worth it because when you're looking for occupations, any occupations, you look for the obituary.
Right.
Because 99% of the time, they'll mention what the guy did or person did in their job, as a job. Right. And the obituaries will tell you that.
Did you find one for James Riley?
No, because when you look at he died in 1855.
Right.
So the newspapers are very hard to read, they're very small print, and they don't have obituaries like we have today.
Right.
You know, they might have just mentioned that somebody died, so that was a little bit early. But certainly by the time of the Civil War and after, they start doing obituaries like we know today.
Right. And of course, local historical societies, which my buddy is no stranger to, and museums. We'll get to your museum shortly. These will have a wealth of sources for people.
And there'll always be somebody, well, always, but there'll usually be somebody there, like all the time at the Butler Museum. People will be coming in asking questions about family, and there'll be somebody there that'll have local history information and probably even familiar with their family.
Right.
Same thing with the Bloomingdale. I just had somebody the other day was looking up about their family, and fortunately we were able to find who they were looking for.
That makes you feel so good.
Oh yeah, it's like finding treasure.
Yeah. And also, there was another source. Now, you mentioned Long Pond, which is a museum. They have a museum.
It's a state park with a museum.
And that's on Ringwood Manor, part of Ringwood Manor?
They're associated. It's very near it, right.
Right. I think it's closed in the winter, but
yes, it is.
I want to go up there in the spring when they open it. But it's a lovely area. It's not a large museum, that one. No.
But they do have a lot of restored buildings on the property.
Yes.
And a lot of history, like there is a furnace and water wheels. So they have really good example of how the water wheels work at Long Pond.
Now, we do have another very unique source, and this is unique to me. I never heard of this until you came along. For iron workers, they had store accounts.
Right.
Okay, there was one. Are these family names Ryerson and Hewitt?
Okay, they're owners.
They're owners.
They are the owners.
Owners of these stores.
Right, like Ryerson actually owned Ringwood. He owned Pumpton Iron Works. His grandson owned the Bloomingdale Forge. So they're owners. And the same thing with Hewitt's. Hewitt's owned Ringwood Manor. They were the last major owners of the manor house.
So how do we connect this with genealogy?
Okay, because at Ringwood, it was really the Trenton Iron Works. That was the name of the company.
Yeah.
And Abram Hewitt was the president. His father-in-law was Cooper of Cooper Union.
Yeah.
And every company would have a company store. And oftentimes, you got paid in credit. So you could take your credit from payday to the company store, and then they would give you, whatever you wanted based on the credit of how much you got paid.
Right.
And they would keep lists. Everybody had an account at the company store. So they would take
The ironworkers would have an account. Okay.
Everybody that worked for the company
Yeah.
would have an account, and then they would subtract your groceries or whatever you were buying from your pay. And they would have lists that you could check, and some of them are available that you could see that, if he's buying stuff at the company store, it's probably working for that company, and therefore probably some relation to the iron industry.
Where are these records, and what do they look like?
Okay, well, it would look like probably similar to what your corner drugstore did, or your corner grocery store, where you'd go in and, they'd keep a track for the Riley family of everything we bought this month. And when we got paid at the end of the month, you'd settle up your account at the grocery store, at the corner store.
And they would list the money that you had made, or?
Well, say we owed $50 this month.
Yeah.
So you'd go in with your paycheck. They'd cash your paycheck with you, subtract $50 for what the products that you got from them.
Yeah.
For the company store, they do the same thing. From your account, they would subtract your credits from your pay.
Right. There is another question I have for you, Tom. Did the companies keep records of their employees, and where can those be found?
For sure, right? Sure, they were usually kept very good records.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and I tried this is one of the first places I tried for James Riley. At Ringwood, most of the records are gone. They didn't keep them. It's an interesting story. They just found a bunch of Ringwood records, and they found it by mistake because a guy was looking at a ledger in the state archives, and he turned the book over, and on the back was Ringwood iron mine records.
Yeah.
They actually were keeping track on the back of the book.
Yes.
So they are out there, but I haven't had any success in using company records.
Right. Have you used the records in other states to find iron workers? Because Pennsylvania, well, that's a coal mining
But
state.
Pennsylvania had a lot of iron industry too, a lot of furnaces, a lot of forges. I haven't, Saugus is another site. There are a number of furnaces that are still, state parks and available to see. But I'm not familiar with their records. I didn't ever go that far because I didn't have anybody to look for there.
But that is a viable source.
Oh yeah, if in that area, if you had somebody, it's worth checking out.
Right, a viable source. Now let's get to your baby. Okay, as I mentioned, Tom has many talents. He's written how many books now?
I'm working on my 9th right now.
And what will that be?
Stories about Riverdale.
Which is a neighboring
town. I did stories about Bloomingdale. I did stories about Butler. The town next to Bloomingdale is Riverdale.
And you're a local historian / genealogist. The two are first cousins. But I know you were active with the Butler Museum for many, many years.
Right.
And Bloomingdale did Bloomingdale have a historical society?
No.
No.
Going way back, what happens, probably not just in Bloomingdale, but at their 50th anniversary, people got together, they came up with a book, and then as time went by, they kind of disappeared.
Right.
And the same thing with the 75th anniversary. So when the 100th anniversary, which is a biggie, the centennial year, we had a committee, and we came up with a book about the history of Bloomingdale. And that's when we started advocating for a museum. Because like you said, everybody else has got a museum.
You keep saying we, but the bottom line, you.
Yeah.
I'm giving you a real ego boost here. Yeah. So you got this brainchild. Now, did you go out and get the space? We'll show many photos of this wonderful museum. Yes.
Well,
this is a labor of love, by the way.
Because it's at the Leisure Field, the baseball stadium.
Yeah.
That,
which has a history of its own.
That's right. Professional baseball team played there.
Right.
And the building there was turned into a firehouse.
Yeah.
And the water department. So they built the new firehouse.
Yeah.
And then they built another municipal building for the water department.
Yes.
So that building became available. And I had been saving baseball stuff forever because I grew up right by the field.
Right.
So I had a ton of
Right.
stuff for that.
Right.
We have a special room just for the
I
professional
saw it.
baseball
I
team.
saw it. Yes, yes.
So when that building became available, you know, that was really, and fortunately, the mayor, the town manager, and a lot of the council people, a lot of them who I had in school, they were 100% in
And
favor
the
of it.
building itself used to be
It was built in 1947 as the clubhouse for the professional team. Clubhouse and locker rooms.
and showers were in there.
showers,
And that's the site that we're talking about
That's
now.
right.
Okay.
And then they expanded the end of it to turn it into a firehouse.
Yeah, yeah.
Which now they don't need anymore.
Yeah.
So that's the next expansion for the museum into that garage.
Yes, you had mentioned that. Yeah.
Which will double the size of the museum.
And what has the response been?
Very good. You know, we have maybe like 20, 25 people, more than that probably on the average a month.
Right.
So some days you'll have 10, other days you'll have 2, you know.
Yeah. And you've been opened almost a year now. April is the first
That's
birthday.
right. And we're open Saturdays 10 to 4.
And you have wonderful displays, and people make donations all the time. I just made a donation today.
There you go.
Yes, this is a very ancient.
Very good. That's hand forged too. That'll be a good addition.
Yeah, that's my contribution to your wonderful museum.
Thank you
now,
very much.
You're only open on
Saturdays, 10 to
from
4.
10 to 4, and it's in, what's the address?
It's 30 Ballston Street, Bloomingdale.
In Bloomingdale, and
Yes.
this is your baby.
It's at the Leisure Field.
Yeah, very, very good. Well, Tom, this has been a wonderful interview. I hope we covered everything. I hope I did you justice. And
As always.
yeah, thank you so much for coming on Family Historian. And thank you, folks, for watching my show on Finding Your Ironworker Ancestor. My name is Stephen Conti, and remember, we are all descendants of ancient civilizations. Genealogy is your key to the history of your family. And so until next time, this is Stephen Conti wishing you the very best of luck in your research and happy ancestor hunting. Good night.